How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf. Quick, what Daf we studying? Samaches? Daf Samaches of Masechta Sanhedrin. Friends, your friends. Yes. So today we're studying Daf Samaches. Interesting. Yeah, it's cool Daf. I think it's going to be relatively quick. I think. But anyways, we're going to finish the 7th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin. That was a long parak. When did this parak start? This was like. Wow, it was a long mem test till basically it was like 20 pages. It was like 3 weeks, almost 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. The 7th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin, and then we are starting the 8th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin, parak Ben Sorer Umore, which is interesting. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. Okay, we're going to start all the way at the bottom of Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis, all the way at the bottom. Omer Rabbi Akiva Chule. So the Mishnah had said that Rabbi Akiva says, I don't know, what does Rabbi Akiva say? He says that Rabbi Akiva Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua, Shnaim loiktin kishur, and you can have two people picking gourds, collecting gourds. Echad locate potter, vechad locate chayv. You can have one of them who's collecting gourds, gathering gourds, I don't know, and he's potter, the other one is chayv for hocus pocus. Somebody who actually does the hocus pocus, chai. But if he only makes it looks like he's doing hocus pocus, it's potter. That's Rabbi Akiva. So now, the Mishnah had said that Rabbi Akiva had learned this out from his Rabbi Yoshua. But is that really true that Rabbi Akiva learned it out from Rabbi Yoshua? We're learning a brayso, and we're going to argue that he learned it from one of his other Rabbi Eliezer. Tani, we learned in the brayso. Kishachol Rabbi Eliezer, when Rabbi Eliezer got sick, Nichnasu Rabbi Akiva v'chaver levakroi. So Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues entered to visit Rabbi Eliezer. Now, of course, Rabbi Eliezer, ever since the Maisa with the Tanu Shel Achnai in Masechta Bava Metzia, so since then, so from that story onwards, he was in excommunication for going against the Chachomim. So now he was very sick, and Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues went to visit Reb Eliezer. Hu Yoshev B'Kiniv Shelo Ve'en Yoshev B'Traklin Shelo, and he was in his I don't know, let's just say his bed. I think you could say like kind of his bed, and they were sitting in the in the parlor, and I don't know. I think the point is that they were like keeping somewhat of a distance because he was excommunicated. Okay. Also, and that day was Take Erev Shabbos. And his son Horkinus came to remove his tefillin because Shabbos was coming. So Horkinus came to remove the tefillin. Go'ar boy v'yotze b'nezifa. And Rabbi Eliezer got upset at his son Horkinus for taking off his tefillin. And Horkinus left the room, and he was in not good graces. Omer loyin lechaverov, and Horkinus says to his father's colleagues, he says to Rabbi Akiva and friends, it looks like my father is kind of losing it. He's on his deathbed. I came to take off his tefillin. It's Erev Shabbos. He's yelling at me. Something's wrong. Omer loyin, to which Rabbi Eliezer heard this, and he responded, Daitum Yushevis, no, nah, I added from the Agosabach, nah, my head is all good. That's imo nitrafa. Okay, but I guess apparently, his wife, maybe there was an issue there. I don't know. Now, Rabbi Eliezer argues in his own defense, I don't understand. It's Erev Shabbos. Me wearing tefillin on Shabbos is at best an Isser D'Rabbanan. There are more important things that you should be doing before Shabbos, right? Making sure the lights are all set, everything's cooked. Those are Isurim D'Oraisa. So Rabbi Eliezer says, look, I got upset because why are you so concerned about me wearing tefillin? There's bigger fish to fry. Literally. So when the Chachomim saw, when Rabbi Akiva and friends saw that, okay, Rabbi Eliezer is not losing it, he still got his noggin, so then Nichnesu v'yashvu lefanov meruchuk daled amas. So they went and they sat next to Rabbi Eliezer at a distance of 4 amas because of the excommunication. Now, it could be that up until now they were talking maybe like in a different room. Kielu, he was in his bed and they were maybe in a different room, but now they came in, but they still kept their distance. Omer lahu lama basim. Rabbi Eliezer says to this group, how come you came? Amrulay, they said to him, Lomo Teireh banu. We came to learn the holy Teireh from the holy master, Rabbi Eliezer. Omar Lu, Rabbi Eliezer responds, Varachshav Lama Lei Basim. Well, how come you haven't come until now? Amrulay, they responded, Lohoya lanu pnai. We didn't have time. Amrulay, he says to them, Tamea ani im yamusu misas atzmon. Rabbi Eliezer says, look, I'd be very surprised if y'all die of old age. Something terrible is going to happen. And sure enough, of course, there was the Asar Rugei Malchus, Rabbi Akiva, who was the head of this delegation. Rabbi Akiva was unfortunately one of the Asar Rugei Malchus. Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Eliezer, Sheli Mahu, what's going to be with me? Omar Lo, and Rabbi Eliezer responds, Shel Chokosha Mishaloin, yours is going to be the worst. Yours is going to be absolutely awful, and his death unfortunately was absolutely awful. And Rabbi Eliezer then proceeded to take his 2 arms and he put them on his heart. Omar, and he says, woe to you, my 2 arms, that they are like 2 rolled up Sifrei Torah, right? That when you take a Sefer Torah and you roll it up, right, and you can't see, right, you don't see the writing in it, you only see the back of the cloth. Harbe Teire Lomadati v'harbe Teire Limadati. Says Rabbi Eliezer, I learned a lot of Torah and I taught a lot of Torah. Harbe Teire Lomadati v'lo chasarti merabesai afilu kekelev amalakik min hayom. I learned a lot of Torah from my Rebbeim, and still it's like a dog licking up, lapping up water from the sea. Does not even make the slightest dent in the volume of the water in the sea. Similarly, I learned a lot from my teachers, but boy, I barely even scratched the surface of their knowledge. And I taught an awful lot of Torah, and yet my students did not deplete me like a stick in a tube. I'm imagining it like you have you like bubbles. You have the stick that you put in the bubbles and you pull it out of the liquid there and you blow the bubbles and then you stick it in again and you blow some more bubbles, and each time you stick it in, it's taking out a tiny amount. So that tiny amount, he says, is what his own students learned from him. And the crazy thing is that Rabbi Eliezer was several generations before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It wasn't until Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that Torah Sheba'al Peh was written down. At that time, during the time of Rabbi Eliezer, the only way to learn Torah Sheba'al Peh was to receive it from your teacher. And he's saying, what I received from my teachers was a drop in the bucket. All of the rest is gone forever. And what my students received from me, a drop in the bucket of that. Everything else, gone forever. He says, I know 300 halachis when it comes to tzaras. Nobody even asked me about any of those 300. Those 300 are gone forever. He says, and I have another 300 halachos. Some say taka 3,000 halachos. But Netias Kshuin, when it comes to planting gourds, and nobody ever asked me about them either. Chutz me'Akiva ben Yosef, except for Rabbi Akiva, pam achas ani vo mehalchin. One time, recounts Rabbi Eliezer that he and Rabbi Akiva were walking. Mehalchin ayinu baderech. Omar li, and Rabbi Akiva says to me, to Rabbi Eliezer, Rebbe, lamdeini b'netias kishuin, teach me about planting gourds. And Rashi says, If I understand correctly, Matias Kishuin, Hilchos Minek Shofim, Shaidim Nismaliko Asodik Shum. Teach me about the hocus pocus that makes a field fill up with gourds. Amarti Dover Echod, says Rabbi Eliezer, so I said some kind of an incantation, I guess. Nismaliko Hasodik Kishuin, and the whole field was then filled with gourds. Amarli Rebbe Limadutoni Nitioson, and then Rabbi Akiva continues and he says, Rebbe, you've taught me how to plant them. Lamdeni Akirosan, now teach me how to uproot them. Amarti Dover Echod, so says Rabbi Eliezer, that I said Epis, Niskabtsu Kulon, Limokum Echom, they all gathered together in one place. So, so Rabbi Eliezer recounts that he knows all these halachis and they're all going to be lost to perpetuity. Is that a word that makes sense here? I don't know. That they're all going to be lost. And then he also recounted that he had all of the 300, maybe 3,000 halachis when it came to gourds, and only Rabbi Akiva asked about it, and he asked about the magic, the hocus pocus regarding gourds. So in our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva had quoted Rabbi Yoshua when it came to the hocus pocus around gourds, but over here it seems that he learned about them from Rabbi Eliezer. Now, Amrulo, Rabbi Akiva and the people who he came with to visit Rabbi Eliezer, right? So this is going back to the visit. So they said to Rabbi Eliezer, "Hakoder va'emus va'kameo v'tzura margos mashkoles kitana mau." So basically, there was a machloikes. Basically, these are different things that are wrapped in leather. So basically, you take a kadur. If you have some kind of like ball, I think it was like a wool or something like that, and then you wrap it in leather. Now the thing is, leather is only going to be makabel tuma if it is if it's a vessel, if it's like a sack, if it's something that can contain something. The thing is, it has to have a base kibul, something to receive. So now, when you wrap something in leather, so you like make some kind of like container, and then you stuff it, and then you close it up. So on the one hand, when you stuff it, when it's open and it's stuffable, so it's a vessel, but then you close it up, and now it just becomes round. So the question is it makabel tuma or not? The rabbis, I think, said no, and I think Rabbi Eliezer said yes. I think, Rabbi Eliezer only makabel tuma, exactly. And then there was also a shaila of, can you dip it in the mikvah? Are the contents going to be considered a chatzitza or not? The Chacham say yes, it's a chatzitza. Rabbi Eliezer says no, it's not a chatzitza. So Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues wanted to know, does Rabbi Eliezer still argue with the Chachamim on those items? So Akader va'emus va'kameh v'tzura margolos u'mashkoles ktana, all these are different types of things that are wrapped in leather. So Ma'u Amrulain Tmein. So Rabbi Eliezer says, I still maintain that they are able to be makabel tuma v'tayrosin b'mashehein, and you can just put, and if they become tamei, then you just put them in the mikvah and they become tahor, i.e. the contents are not going to be a chatzitza. Minol she'al gabe emus ma'u, and what about I guess the way that they would make shoes is they would put the leather, they would put the shoe that they're crafting around a mold of a shoe. And the question is, at what point does it become a shoe? At what point does it become something that's makabel tumah? So the Chachamim say, so long as it is still on the mold, even though it doesn't require any skilled labor anymore, you simply just take the shoe off. Still, so long as the shoe has not been taken off of the mold, it is not yet makabel tumah. Rabbi Eliezer says it is already makabel tumah. So Amar Loin, Rabbi Eliezer responds, Hu tahor, it is not. Wait, what? Tahor. Wait, I guess fakir. Did I get that wrong? I don't know what I said a minute ago, but the Chacham's opinion is that in that case, by the shoe that's still on the mold, it is mukhshar likabel tuma, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says no, so long as it hasn't yet been removed from the mold, it is tahor, it is not mukhshar likabel tuma. V'yotzin ishmaso b'tayr. And as he said tahora on that halacha, his spirit, his soul, left his body, his neshama left his body in purity. Omar Rabbi Yoshua Araglav, and immediately Rabbi Yoshua stood up when Rabbi Eliezer passed away. Rabbi Eliezer passed away when he was excommunicated. In his excommunication, immediately Rabbi Yoshua stands up and he says, Hutur aneder, Hutur aneder. The excommunication is released. The excommunication is released. L'motzei Shabbos paga boy Rabbi Akiva min Kesari Lelud, and on Motzei Shabbos Rabbi Akiva bumped into the funeral procession, which was at that time between Kesari and Lud. Hayamaki b'bsaroi, and Rabbi Akiva was hitting himself on his flesh until he was bleeding and his blood was dripping down was streaming down to the ground. Posach olav b'shur v'amar, and Rabbi Akiva says, Avi rechev Yisrael ufarashov, my father, the chariot of Israel and its riders, harbe ma'os yeshli ve'enli shulchani la'artzosan. I have so much money and I have no money changer to change them at. I have so many questions and now I no longer have anybody to ask them to. So Tosfos asked an interesting kasha, because right, the pasuk of course says, right, v'lo sikchu kor chol ameis, right? Is that the mishum seret lanefesh? Sorry, right? Don't make yourself bleed when somebody passes away. So how does Rabbi Eliezer, how is Rabbi Akiva able to do that? He was able to do that because he wasn't making himself bleed because of the person who died, but because of the what is it? Is because of the Torah. It's because he's doing it on account of the loss of Torah, not because of the fact that somebody passed away. Okay, so Amar mi Rabbi Eliezer Gemara. So as part of that whole anecdote was that Rabbi Akiva had asked Rabbi Eliezer about the hocus pocus around gourds. So I'm Rabbi Eliezer Gamar. So Rabbi Akiva learned from Rabbi Eliezer, now Rabbi Yoshua. So Gemara Rabbi Eliezer v'lo savra. Well, he learned it initially from Rabbi Eliezer, but he didn't understand it. Had the Gemara Rabbi Yoshua, but then he learned it Nachamal from Rabbi Yoshua later on. Ve'azbra, and he understood it. Ve'azbra ni'alei, and Rabbi Yoshua explained it to him, and then that time Rabbi Akiva understood it. Heichi Ovid. Now, how could it be that Rabbi Eliezer was actually doing hocus pocus? We learned in our Mishnah that if you mamish do hocus pocus with these gourds, you're going to be chayiv. How could Rabbi Eliezer have done that? The Islam is shiny. It's different if it's in the context of learning about avodah zarah. Because we said lo silmad lasos. The Pasuk says don't learn about avodah zarah in order to do it yourself, to worship avodah zarah. But you can't learn about avodah zarah in order so that you can be an oived avodah zarah. No, that's of course a problem. But you can learn about by the simulasos. Where am I? But you can learn in order to understand about avodah zarah and to be able to teach about it. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yoshua was asking Rabbi Eliezer. Can you teach me about what it means to use hocus pocus to grow and gather gourds? Hadron Olach, Arba Misos, will come back to you. Arba Misos. Okay, and now we get to the 8th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin, the parak of Ben Sorer U More. Very interesting parak, if you're interested in it. It talks about the rebellious child. Basically, Ben Sorer U More, as we're going to beginning learning about already today, is a rebellious child who, when he's 13 years old, now there's, as we're going to already learn today, I think at least start learning today and continue learning tomorrow, that basically when this boy turns 13 years old, there is a 3-month window in which he can be a Ben Sorer U More. And in this 3-month window, if he steals money from his father and spends it on meat and wine, okay, he steals money from his father, spends it on meat and wine, and he eats the meat, he drinks the wine, so then he's a Ben Sorer U More for stealing and eating meat and drinking wine. And he's chayiv skila. We taka kill him. And Ben Sorer U More is a big chiddush because the whole thing makes no sense, right? Like, theft is not a capital punishment, but the whole thing is, as the Mishnah is going to say on Daf Ayin Aleph Mud Beis, that Ben Sora Mora is Nidon al Shem Sofo. That the reason why Ben Sora Mora is killed, even though all he did was steal a little bit and eat some wine, drink some wine, eat some meat, is Nerag al Shem Sofo, because we say that, look, if at this age he's stealing and he has such an appetite for a taiva for meat and wine, well, a person like this who at such a young age is demonstrating that he's willing to steal in order to get these things. Well, then as he gets older and he needs to start figuring out on his own how to get these things, he's going to rob people and be a menace to society, and therefore we kill him. But as we're going to see in the Gemara in I think another 2 days, that there is a opinion that Ben Sora Mora never happened, so therefore why do we have it? Josh v'kabosacha, just so we can learn, right, and get sachar for it. But it's it's certainly a very interesting sugya. Says the Mishnah Daf Samachas Mabez, Ben Sora Umora, this rebellious child, may Moshe Naisa Ben Sora Umora. When does he become Ben Sora Umora? Mishayavi Shtei Cyrus. Once he has 2 pubic hairs, although let's just say 2 hairs. Bachiakiv Zakon, until he has a full beard. Hatachton velo ha'elyon. And we're talking about pubic hairs and pubic beards. If in his pubic area, so from the time that he gets 2 hairs, so he's right. So at that point, until until he has lots of pubic hairs. Sheyakiv zkana tachton, until he has a full pubic haired area. V'lo ha'elyon, we're not talking about his beard, we're talking about his private parts. Ella shedibru chachamim b'lashon nikiya. So why do we say zakon, which is generally a beard? Because the chacham wanted to speak in a cleaner manner, and therefore called it a beard. But they just say beard, and then they leave it up to me to kind of get into the awkward details. All right. So now, fine. Maybe I should also just speak B'lashon Nikiya also, and I'll just pass it on. That we're talking about the lower beard and not the upper beard. And let's let somebody else explain what that means. Alright. Shneimar Kiyeh Le'ish Ben, that it says that when a person will have a son, Ben v'lo bas, a son, not a daughter, Ben v'lo ish, and also a son, but not an ish, not an adult. Meaning, once he's already an adult, then he's not a Ben Sora Mora. He can't be a Ben Sora Mora. Kohen Potter, and a kohen, a minor, can't be a Ben Sora Mora because he's not yet chayiv in mitzvahs. Right? He's not yet chayiv in any mitzvahs, and therefore he's too young. He can't be a Ben Sora Mora. Okay. Says the Gemara, kohen minolan de Potter. From where do we have a scriptural source to say that a kohen cannot be a Ben Sora Mora? Minolan. What do you mean? Where do we have a scriptural source? The Mishnah already explained to us why a kohen cannot be a Ben Sora Mora, because he's not yet chayiv in mitzvahs yet. And also in general, Ketanim are never chayiv for anything. So why all of a sudden here are we asking for a scriptural source to say that a kohen cannot be a Ben Sora Mora? A kohen can never be anything. So what we're saying is Atu Ben Sora Umora al Cheto Nerug. What is a Ben Sora Umora being killed because of the sin that he committed? What was the sin that he committed? Theft. Theft is not a capital punishment. It's not a capital offense. So Hashem Sofo Nerug. It's a whole big chiddush that we're actually killing him not because of what he did, but because of what he's going to do in the future. And therefore, since Ben Sora Umora is not being killed for the sin that he did, sin that he did is theft. That's not a capital punishment. That's not a capital offense. But it's not for what he did, but rather what he's going to do. And therefore, maybe since it's not about the sin that he committed, but about future sins, maybe it could even apply to a kohen. So afilu kohen nami. So I might think that even a kohen is included, and that's why we're asking for a scriptural source to say a kohen is excluded. V'odem also ben v'lo ish kohen mashma. And also when we say a Ben Sora Mora to the exclusion of an ish, well then that implies that it would include a kohen. So Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, therefore it says Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, the Pasuk says V'chiyah leish ben, that when there will be to ish a ben. What does Rashi say? I think Rashi says it good. Ma'kiyah leish ben. Wait, where am I? V'chiyah leish ben. So Amar l'she'agia l'chlal ish, once he becomes an ish, i.e. when he has two hairs, right? Shtei Cyrus. Haben hazeh. That when this ben becomes an ish, at that point he is a ben soramor, and as we're going to learn that there's a 3-month window. Okay, so again, so it's this ben that is very near, very close to the might of men, i.e. at the very beginning of the journey of being an adult. Once you have Shtei Cyrus and Ad She'akiv Zakon. So Reb Chia says until the Atorah, which is like the upper part of the penis is covered with hair. When Rav Dimi came, Amri says Akofas Gid v'lo Akofas Beitzim. Gevaldig. We're talking about the hair surrounding the I don't know, like the penis part and not the scrotum part. Gevaldig. Amar Rav Chisda says, Kohen sheholid ein beno naise ben sor umor. If you have a kohen who has a baby, and the Gemara is going to talk about tomorrow about is it possible for a boy who's not yet an adult to have a baby? But anyways, Amar Rav Chisda, Kohen sheholid, if a kohen has a baby, ein beno naise ben sor umor, that child cannot be a ben sor umor. Shneimar Zpazas ki yeh leish ben v'lo leben ben. That when an adult will have a child, when an adult has a child, not when a child has a child. But 1 second, isn't ki leish ben needed for what Rav Yehuda Amar Rav had just said? That ben hasamach l'gvoso shalish, that is talking about, right when he has Shtei Cyrus. So ben leish. Well, if that was the case, then it would say when a ben becomes an ish. Ma'keh leish ben. What does it mean when an adult will have a ben? It's like Rav Chisda says that when an adult has a child, not when a child has a child, not when a minor has a child. Maybe I'll say that all it's teaching is like Rav Chisda, that leish ben v'lo leben ben. Imkei nemakra ben ish. Right, then we would have the son of an ish. My leish ben. Shmamina Taite teaches both. It teaches that it has to be an adult who has a child, and also that it applies to the ben sora needs to be the son of an adult, and also that we're talking about a child who has just reached 2 pubic hairs. Wow, I got super tired there at the end. But that we wrapped up. Okay, so that was the Samches Masechta Sanhedrin. We wrapped up the 7th parak of Masechta Sanhedrin. There was an interesting Agadata, an interesting story about when Rabbi Eliezer was on his deathbed and Rabbi Kiva and others came to visit him. Some very interesting stuff there about his excommunication, and they released it. And then we started the parak of Ben Sora Umore. We haven't yet gotten much into the details, but the parak of the rebellious child. Peace out.